Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something that every single person in this room will face at some point in their life. I want to talk to you about that year. You know, the one I'm talking about. That year when everything seems to go wrong. That year when the bottom falls out. That year when you look up at the sky and wonder if somebody up there has it out for you personally. Now, here's what I've learned about those years, and I've had a few of them myself. The worst year of your life can become the best teacher you'll ever have. But only if you're willing to be a student. Only if you're willing to learn the lessons that difficulty is trying to teach you. You see, most people waste their worst year. They spend it complaining, blaming, making excuses, feeling sorry for themselves. And I understand that. When things go wrong, the natural human tendency is to look outside ourselves for the reason. It was the economy. It was my boss. It was my spouse. It was bad luck. It was bad timing. It was everything and everyone except the person looking back at us in the mirror. But here's the fundamental truth that changed everything for me. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. That is something you have absolute control over. And when you change, everything changes around you. Not because the world is different, but because you are different. Let me tell you about my worst year. I'm not going to give you the whole sob story because that's not what this is about. But I will tell you this. I had failed in business. My bank account was empty. My confidence was shattered. I was working a job I didn't like, making money I couldn't live on, coming home to an apartment I was embarrassed to have anyone visit. I was 25 years old and I felt like life had already passed me by. I remember one particular day standing in my small apartment, looking at a stack of bills I couldn't pay, and I had a choice to make. I could continue down the path I was on, blaming everyone and everything for my circumstances, or I could take full responsibility for where I was and decide that if life was going to get better, it was going to get better because I got better. That decision, that simple decision to stop being a victim and start being a student was the beginning of everything good that happened in my life after that point. And I want to share with you the specific things I learned during that worst year that transformed it into my best year. And more importantly, transformed me into a different person. The first lesson I learned was this: you must take full responsibility for your life. Not partial responsibility, not most of the responsibility, full, complete 100% responsibility, no exceptions, no excuses, no blaming. Now, this is a bitter pill to swallow, because when you take full responsibility, you're saying that where you are right now is because of the choices you've made, the actions you've taken, the habits you've developed, the associations you've kept, the books you've read or haven't read, the disciplines you've practiced or neglected. That's hard to accept. It's much easier to find someone or something else to blame. But here's why this is the most liberating truth you'll ever discover. If you're responsible for where you are, then you're also responsible for where you're going. If your current circumstances are the result of your past decisions, then your future circumstances will be the result of your current decisions. You have the power. You have the control. You don't have to wait for the economy to change, for your boss to recognize you, for your luck to turn around. You can start changing your life right now, today, this very moment. During my worst year, I started keeping a journal. Every day I would write down what happened and what I learned. And I'll tell you, at first, that journal was full of complaints and excuses. But as I continued the practice, something started to change. I started seeing patterns. I started seeing how my own decisions, my own lack of discipline, my own poor habits were creating the results I was getting. I saw that I was spending my evenings watching television instead of reading books that could improve my mind. I was associating with people who were going nowhere instead of finding people who could mentor me and inspire me. I was eating poorly, not exercising, not taking care of my health. I was showing up late to work, doing just enough to get by, and wondering why I wasn't getting promoted. I was spending money I didn't have on things I didn't need instead of investing in myself and my future. The journal became a mirror, and what I saw in that mirror wasn't pretty, but it was honest, and honesty is where all progress begins. You cannot fix what you will not face. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. So the first step in turning my worst year into my best year was accepting full responsibility. And I'm telling you, when you do this, when you truly accept that you are where you are because of you, something shifts inside. The victim mentality falls away. The excuses dry up. The blame stops. And in its place comes power. The power to change, the power to grow, the power to become more than you are. The second lesson I learned was about goals and dreams. You see, I had dreams, big dreams. I wanted to be successful. I wanted financial independence. I wanted to make a difference. But dreams without goals are just wishes. They're fantasy. They make you feel good for a moment, but they don't change your life. During my worst year, I realized I had been dreaming but not planning. I had been wishing but not working. I had been hoping things would get better but doing nothing different to make them better. And that's not how life works. Life responds to effort. Life responds to discipline. Life responds to clear, specific, written goals with deadlines attached. So I started setting goals. Not just general wishes like, I want to be rich or I want to be successful. Those aren't goals, those are fantasies. I set specific, measurable, time-bound goals. I will read 1 book per week for the next year. That's 52 books. I will save 10% of every dollar I earn, no matter how small that amount is. I will find a mentor within the next 90 days. I will improve my skills in my field by taking 1 course every quarter. These were goals I could track, goals I could measure, goals that would force me to grow. And here's what I discovered. When you set clear goals and work toward them every single day, you become a different person. Not someday in the future when you achieve the goal, but right now in the working toward it. The goal is important, but who you become in pursuit of the goal is even more important. Think about it this way. If you set a goal to read 1 book per week, you might not hit that goal every single week. Life happens. Things come up. But even if you only read 30 books that year instead of 52, you're still a different person than you were. You've put 30 books worth of knowledge and wisdom and ideas into your mind. You've invested in yourself. You've grown. That's what goals do. They force growth. But here's the key. Your goals must be written. There's something powerful that happens when you take a dream or an idea from your head and put it on paper. It becomes real. It becomes concrete. It stops being a wish and starts being a plan. I cannot emphasize this enough. If your goals aren't written, they're not real goals. They're just ideas floating around in your head, and ideas without action are worthless. During that worst year, I bought a notebook and I wrote down my goals. 1-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals. I wrote down what I wanted to achieve financially, professionally, personally, in my health, in my relationships. I got specific. I attached numbers and dates. And then I did something even more important. I reviewed those goals every single day. Every morning I would open that notebook and read my goals. Not once in a while, not when I felt like it, every single day. Because here's what happens when you review your goals daily. They get into your subconscious mind. They start directing your decisions. They start filtering your opportunities. You start seeing things you didn't see before, noticing chances you would have missed, making choices that align with where you want to go instead of just reacting to whatever comes your way. And slowly, gradually, things started to change. Not overnight, not in a week or a month, but over time, consistent daily action toward clear written goals produced results. Small results at first, then bigger ones, then results that surprised even me. And all because I stopped dreaming and started planning. I stopped wishing and started working. The third lesson I learned during my worst year was about the power of association. Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I found this to be absolutely true. When I looked at the 5 people I was spending the most time with during my worst year, I realized they were all going nowhere. They were all complainers, blamers, excuse makers. They were all stuck in the same place I was stuck, doing the same things I was doing, getting the same results I was getting. And I made a difficult decision. I started to distance myself from those associations and seek out new ones. I started going to places where successful people gathered. I started reading books by people who had achieved what I wanted to achieve. I started listening to tapes and attending seminars. I couldn't afford most of these things, but I found a way. I made it a priority because I realized that if I wanted different results, I needed different thinking, and if I wanted different thinking, I needed to be around different people. This wasn't easy. Some of those people I distanced myself from were friends. Some were family. And I'm not saying you should cut people out of your life completely, but you do have to be selective about who influences you, who you listen to, who you allow to speak into your life and your future, because influence is everything. Show me who you spend time with and I'll show you who you're becoming. I started seeking out mentors, people who had been where I wanted to go, people who had achieved what I wanted to achieve. And here's what I discovered. Successful people are usually willing to help if you're sincere, if you're teachable, if you're willing to do the work. They don't want to waste their time with people who just want a handout or a shortcut, but if you come to them with genuine desire to learn and grow, if you respect their time and show that you're serious, most of them will invest in you. I found a mentor who took me under his wing. He taught me things they don't teach in school. He showed me how to think differently about money, about business, about success. He introduced me to other successful people. He recommended books for me to read. He challenged me to set bigger goals than I thought possible. And most importantly, he believed in me before I believed in myself. That association, that relationship was worth more than any college degree I could have earned. It changed my thinking, which changed my actions, which changed my results. And it all started because I made a conscious decision to change who I was spending time with. Let me tell you something about association that most people don't understand. The people around you don't just influence what you do. They influence what you think is possible. If you're around people who think small, you'll think small. If you're around people who complain about the economy, you'll see obstacles everywhere. If you're around people who make excuses, you'll find excuses easy to make. But if you're around people who think big, who see opportunity, who take responsibility, who execute on their ideas, who persist through difficulty, you'll start adopting those same patterns. You'll start believing that you can do more, be more, achieve more. And that belief, that shift in what you think is possible, changes everything. The fourth lesson I learned was about the power of learning. During my worst year, I realized I had stopped learning. I had stopped growing. I had stopped feeding my mind with new ideas, new information, new skills. I was running on empty, doing the same things the same way, expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. So I made a commitment. I committed to becoming a student again. Not a student in the formal sense of going back to school, although there's nothing wrong with that, but a student of success, a student of personal development, a student of my craft, my field, my industry. I committed to constant and never-ending improvement. I started reading every day. Not the newspaper, not magazines, not fiction for entertainment. Books that would make me better. Books on success, on business, on psychology, on sales, on leadership, on personal development. Books by people who had achieved what I wanted to achieve. And I didn't just read them casually. I studied them. I took notes. I applied what I learned. Here's what I discovered about reading. Books are incredible. Think about it. Someone spends 20, 30, 40 years learning something, mastering something, achieving something, and then they distill all of that experience and knowledge into a book that you can buy for $20 and read in a week. You get decades of wisdom for the price of lunch. That's an incredible bargain. But most people don't read. The statistics are shocking. The average American reads less than one book per year after they finish their formal education. One book per year. And then they wonder why they're not growing, not advancing, not achieving their goals. If you want to be average, do what average people do. But if you want to be exceptional, you have to do exceptional things. And one of those exceptional things is to commit to constant learning. I read one book per week. That's 52 books per year. In 5 years, that's over 250 books. Imagine the knowledge you'd have. Imagine the ideas you'd be exposed to. Imagine how different your thinking would be. Imagine how much you'd grow. That's not a small thing. That's transformative. But reading wasn't the only way I learned. I listened to audio programs in my car. Instead of listening to music or talk radio, I turned my car into a mobile classroom. Every drive, every commute, every trip to the store was an opportunity to learn something new. I calculated that the average person spends 500 to 1,000 hours per year in their car. That's like getting 12 to 25 weeks of college-level education just by using your drive time differently. I attended seminars and workshops. These cost money, and during my worst year, I didn't have much money, but I found a way. I cut expenses in other areas. I made it a priority because I knew that investing in my mind, in my knowledge, in my skills was the best investment I could make. It would pay dividends for the rest of my life. And here's what happened. As I learned, I grew. As I grew, I became more valuable. As I became more valuable, I earned more. As I earned more, I could invest more in my learning. It became a positive cycle, an upward spiral. But it started with that commitment to learn, to grow, to constantly improve. The fifth lesson I learned was about discipline. This might be the most important lesson of all. During my worst year, I lacked discipline. I did what was easy, what was comfortable, what felt good in the moment. I slept in when I should have gotten up early. I watched television when I should have been reading. I spent money when I should have been saving. I procrastinated when I should have been taking action. And here's what I learned about discipline. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. You can have all the goals in the world, all the knowledge in the world, all the opportunities in the world, but without discipline, without the ability to do what you should do when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not, nothing happens. Discipline is everything. So I started developing discipline. Small disciplines at first. I started making my bed every morning. That sounds trivial, but it's not. It's the first discipline of the day. It's a small victory that sets the tone. I started getting up at the same time every day, even on weekends. I started exercising even when I didn't feel like it. I started saving a portion of every dollar I earned, even when the amount was small. These small disciplines led to bigger disciplines. I disciplined myself to work on my goals every single day, even when I was tired, even when I didn't see immediate results. I disciplined myself to keep learning, keep growing, keep pushing forward, even when it was hard, even when I wanted to quit. And here's the truth about discipline. It's hard at first. It requires effort. It requires you to override your feelings, your moods, your desires for instant gratification. But over time, discipline becomes easier. It becomes a habit. It becomes part of who you are. And once that happens, once discipline becomes automatic, success becomes inevitable. Think about it this way. If you discipline yourself to save 10% of your income every single month for 30 years, you'll be wealthy. It's not complicated. It doesn't require luck or genius or connections. It just requires discipline. If you discipline yourself to read 30 minutes every day for 10 years, you'll be one of the most knowledgeable people in your field. If you discipline yourself to exercise 4 times per week for a year, you'll be in the best shape of your life. Discipline works. It always works, but you have to do it consistently day after day, whether you feel like it or not. During my worst year, I created what I called a daily discipline checklist. Every day, I had certain things I had to do. Read for at least 30 minutes, review my goals, make sales calls, exercise, save a portion of my income, work on improving a skill. These weren't negotiable. These weren't things I did if I felt like it or if I had time. These were non-negotiable daily disciplines. And some days I didn't want to do them. Some days I was tired or discouraged or busy, but I did them anyway. Because I understood that success is not about what you do occasionally, it's about what you do consistently. It's about those daily disciplines, those small actions repeated over time that compound into extraordinary results. The sixth lesson I learned was about the power of gratitude and perspective. During my worst year, I spent a lot of time focused on what I didn't have, what wasn't working, what had gone wrong, and that focus made me miserable. It made me bitter. It made me feel like a victim. But then I started practicing gratitude. Every day I would write down 3 things I was grateful for. At first, this was hard. When you're in a bad place, when things aren't going well, it's hard to find things to be grateful for. But I forced myself. I was grateful for my health. I was grateful for my family. I was grateful that I lived in a country where opportunity was available to anyone willing to work for it. I was grateful for the lessons I was learning, even though they were hard lessons. And something amazing happened. As I focused on gratitude, my perspective shifted. I started seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. I started seeing possibility instead of problems. I started seeing what was right with my life instead of only what was wrong. And that shift in perspective changed everything. Here's what I learned. You can't be grateful and depressed at the same time. You can't be grateful and bitter at the same time. Gratitude is an antidote to negativity. It shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have, from what's wrong to what's right, from problems to blessings. And when your focus shifts, your feelings shift, your energy shifts, your actions shift, and ultimately your results shift. I also learned to be grateful for my worst year itself. As strange as that sounds, I became grateful for that difficult time because it taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. It forced me to grow in ways I never would have grown if everything had been easy. It showed me what I was capable of, what I was made of, what I could overcome. Some people go through hard times and become bitter. They become victims. They spend the rest of their lives talking about how unfair life was to them, how they got a raw deal, how things should have been different. Other people go through hard times and become better. They become stronger. They learn. They grow. They use the difficulty as fuel for future success. The difference isn't in the circumstances. The difference is in the perspective, in the attitude, in the choice to see challenges as opportunities for growth rather than as reasons to give up. The seventh lesson I learned was about the importance of faith and persistence. There were many times during my worst year when I wanted to quit, times when I didn't see how things could get better, times when I wondered if all this effort, all this discipline, all this learning was worth it, times when the results I wanted seemed impossibly far away. But I kept going, I persisted. I had faith that if I kept doing the right things, kept working on myself, kept moving forward, eventually things would change. And they did. Not overnight, not as fast as I wanted, but they changed. Here's what I learned about persistence. Most people quit right before the breakthrough. They work hard for a while, don't see immediate results, and give up. They plant seeds but don't stick around long enough for the harvest. They start projects but don't finish them. They set goals but abandon them when things get hard. But success requires persistence. It requires the ability to keep going when you don't see progress, to keep working when you don't feel like it, to keep believing when the evidence suggests you should give up. It requires faith that your efforts are accumulating, that you're building something, that eventually all this work will pay off. I thought about the bamboo tree. The Chinese bamboo tree is planted, watered, and fertilized, but nothing happens for 4 years. No visible growth at all. But in the 5th year, the tree grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. Now, did the tree grow 90 feet in 6 weeks, or did it grow 90 feet in 5 years? The answer is obvious. It was growing the entire time. You just couldn't see it. It was developing its root system, building the foundation that would support that incredible growth. Your success is like that bamboo tree. You're working, learning, growing, developing, but you might not see visible results right away. That doesn't mean nothing is happening. That doesn't mean your efforts are wasted. You're building roots. You're developing foundation. And if you persist, if you keep watering and fertilizing, if you keep doing the right things day after day, eventually you'll see that incredible growth. But you have to stick around long enough for the harvest. During my worst year, I wrote a sentence on a card that I carried with me everywhere. I will persist until I succeed. And on the days when I wanted to quit, when I was discouraged, when I didn't see how things could get better, I would pull out that card and read it. And I would remind myself that quitting is permanent, but discouragement is temporary. I would remind myself that every successful person I admired had faced similar challenges, similar doubts, similar moments when they wanted to quit. And the only difference between them and the people who didn't make it was that they persisted. They kept going. They refused to quit. The 8th lesson I learned was about the power of serving others and adding value. During my worst year, I was focused on myself. What could I get? How could I make more money? How could I advance? How could I succeed? And that focus on taking, on getting, on advancing myself actually held me back. Then I learned a fundamental principle. You get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. The more value you bring, the more you get paid. If you want to earn more, become more valuable. If you want to advance, help others advance. If you want to be successful, help others succeed. So I shifted my focus from getting to giving. I started asking myself, how can I serve? How can I add value? How can I help solve problems for others? How can I make other people's lives better? And that shift changed everything. At my job, instead of just doing the minimum required, I started looking for ways to add more value. I stayed late. I volunteered for projects nobody else wanted. I looked for problems I could solve, improvements I could make, ways I could help the company succeed, and guess what happened? I got noticed, I got promoted, I got raises. Not because I was asking for them, but because I had made myself more valuable. In my relationships, I started focusing on what I could give rather than what I could get. I started looking for ways to help my friends, my family, my acquaintances. I made introductions, I shared knowledge, I offered assistance.